Hi, I'm Megan Finnerty, and I am so excited to see all of you. I'm an editor at the USA Today Network, and I'm your host of USA Today's new coronavirus conversations. I'm based in Phoenix, and as you can see from my background, I'm working from home like everybody else. So if you hear anything, it might be my 5-month-old. His name is George, and my husband's also co working. And so we're excited to have you here today. Here's what we're doing. I'm here today with a bunch of reporters and experts from across the USA Today network to talk about your most urgent questions. I'm going to get started by introducing some of my colleagues and our special guests. Nathan Bomey, he's here to talk about which companies are hiring right now across America. Ken Altucker is here to talk about uneven testing access across the country. John Deanna is going to talk to us about what are elder hours and are they working at your local grocery store? And lastly, we're going to talk to David and Jackson about the senior year that isn't. David Young is the superintendent of Abilene Independent School System, and that is his senior year son, Jackson, who's missing out on a lot. So we're going to go to all of you guys in just a second. But first, I want to tell you what we're doing. This is a new weekly show. It's airing every Tuesday at 9:30 Pacific, 12:30 on our East Coast. And our mission is to deliver to you facts because we know that facts fight fear. We're going to do it using the power and the hearts of our more than 5,000 journalists across the USA Today network, which no other news organization can deliver to answer your key questions and keep you informed. And most importantly, we're here to help you. This is a critical time. There's no you, there's no us. Things are honestly pretty weird, right? And this camera is meant to help you and bring us closer and not make us feel separated. Instead, what we're here to do is give you what we know and help you share ways that you can be of service to the people close to you. Here's what we're not going to do. We're not going to scare you or talk over each other or get weird. That's just super stressful and no one wants to do that. We're not going to get wonky and drone on. Instead, we're going to share expert insights in a way that empowers you. We're also, though, going to share personal stories and have real conversation because we're all in this together and we want you to know that because we certainly feel that way. Our goal in every episode is to inform you, offer you a sense of connectivity. We're going to dig into the pressing issues of the day and help you decipher some of what's pretty unsettling right now. We're covering health, work, money, parenting, elder care, all of it. And we're going to be focused on creating community. So, with that, thanks for being here. We're going to start with Ken Altucker. He's our health reporter at USA Today. Hey, Ken. So, you're coming to
Hi,
us from your house. How's it going?
it's going great. I'm here with my wife and two girls. We're in Virginia, Northern Virginia, and we just learned yesterday that the schools will be out for the remainder of the year, so we're adapting.
How old are your girls? That sounds pretty intense.
Yeah, I've got a 10 and a 12-year-old, fourth and sixth grade, so they're doing great. They're doing ad hoc classrooms with their friends, all online, all practicing social distancing, but they've been fabulous.
Oh man, well, hi to them and best wishes. I think that's every kid's both fantasy and nightmare is to like be off school for the rest of
Right.
the year. Ken, before we get into some of your questions about testing, I just want to remind if you're watching, please share this live stream. You know, we're coming to you on Facebook Live, and you can like tell your friends and encourage them to watch because what Ken has to say, I think, is super, super important. So, Ken, let's start with why is the testing situation so uneven across the country?
Well, we got off to a rocky start. As cases were beginning to emerge in Wuhan, China, the CDC made the decision to develop their own tests for this. And they did that, but the initial test kits that the CDC sent out to states and local health labs in early February were flawed for the most part. So the states and local health labs got these tests and discovered they couldn't really verify the results, notified the CDC. So that really put the US weeks behind on this. Since then, they've tried to catch up by doing that by expanding testing options. Like we have private labs such as LabCorp and Quest that are now supplementing the testing. So there are a lot of options out there. Still probably not enough testing to keep up with the demand from everybody who wants a test.
Well, so Ken, let's go to that. Let's bring up a slide about if you want to be tested or you think you need to be, kind of give us some context around both like what should you do and how is this working?
Right. The CDC initially said that only people who are symptomatic and have a travel history to areas should be tested. That was before the virus came to the United States. Now it's here, circulating in several metro areas in the country. So the CDC and other public health officials really want patients and people to coordinate with their doctor. They want there to be, some order of this. In large part, it's due to we can't handle everybody being tested at once because that strains valuable resources for the healthcare system.
So if I think I'm saying, you were saying that like 90% of the tests are negative. So like, even if you're symptomatic, it could be allergies, it could be the flu. Like you have to really know what the symptoms of this virus are
Right.
to self-select.
Exactly. And so, certain people are tracking testing rates, and roughly 90%, by some estimates, are coming back negative. And so, symptoms include like fever, cough, and shortness of breath. Those are the basic symptoms, and they could be more serious symptoms. And for those folks who have more serious symptoms, like extreme shortness of breath, they should go to a hospital and certainly get treatment. And from there, they can get tested.
So it says, you were talking about how only doctors can order a test. Does that mean that like I can't just call Quest, or how does this work?
Well, for the most part, they want doctors to order these tests, and in part, it's good to coordinate with your doctor because they know what signs that are worrisome and what to watch out for, and when you may need more advanced care, like in a hospital. So that's important. And another reason is areas like New York and Los Angeles, where the virus is really circulating right now. They don't want people with really mild symptoms to kind of clog up the system, if you will, because there's only a certain amount of equipment that healthcare workers need. They need to protect themselves, and there's a certain amount of bed space that they have. And so public health is trying to manage this as best they can. And if you have mild symptoms, for the most part, you're going to probably recover. But there are certain scenarios where it becomes tricky. Like, say you're a 20-something and you're taking care of a grandmother or grandfather in your house. You don't want to pass those symptoms along, or possible infection along, to somebody in your household. So it creates some really sticky situations.
Well, so talk to me about this. You're saying more tests are going to be available because private testing labs are coming on board to produce these more rapidly. But you were mentioning that like accessibility varies vastly city to city and state to state. So I want to have you kind of wrap up this section for a second by talking about, you mentioned like our community obligation to each other. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Right. In a sense, the mandate now is social distancing because we want to, that's the way we're going to stop the spread of this virus. And we're sort of all in this together. Initially when the CDC sent out testing kits, it was roughly equal. So South Dakota got the same testing capacity as New York, at least from a state lab perspective. And you look at the population, it certainly is different. So that created some uneven distribution of tests, but now the private labs are coming online and trying to make up for that lack of testing capacity.
Man, Ken, thank you so much for chatting with us. Normally we would love to have you on, but I know that you have a pressing interview right this second that you have to get to. So thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Thank you for your reporting. So we're going to bring on my former colleague, John Deanna. He's a specialty reporter at the Arizona Republic. And recently, John went shopping during elder hours at a grocery store in town. And John, briefly, how did it go?
Not well, Megan. A number of grocery stores are trying to do what they can to accommodate people who are running short on supplies. I did a story not too long ago about an elderly heart transplant patient whose wife has dementia, and they were actually running out of food. So more and more places are trying to accommodate people like this man. I went to a grocery chain called Bash's', and I got there at 4:30 in the morning. And what Bash's' is doing is trying to they opened the store an hour early at 5 a.m., and it was just for seniors. They were actually checking IDs. You had to be 65 or older. When I got there, the line was about 200 yards long. And so these are people who are in a higher risk group, who are actually being forced into congregating, and it was the exact opposite of social distancing. The store manager was trying to make the best of a really bad situation, and he was being very friendly, but he was not wearing gloves. He was patting people on the shoulder and doing the kind of social touching. And then he was handling their IDs without gloves because, like I said, they were checking IDs.
Yeah.
So it was kind of an exercise in what not to do.
God, that sounds so hard because I'm sure he was doing things that seemed like a good idea. But so real quick though, I want to ask you, how widespread are these? Is this like a lot of grocery chains across the country are doing this? Can you kind of comment on that?
Yeah, a lot of them are. There's a chain called Ralph's in Southern California that I researched, and what they're doing is something a little bit different. They are just taking, whenever seniors arrive at the store, they're having employees sort of escort them around and help them to find the items that they need. They've got some special stations set up around the store for things like toilet paper if they have it in stock. And then another thing they're doing is just ushering those seniors to the front of the line. But yeah, more and more chains are trying to do something special to accommodate seniors so that they can get the supplies that they need, and hopefully without, exposing them to somebody who may or may not have the virus.
That all sounds incredibly responsible. But I know you have tips for how we can do more to help our colleagues because we're our colleagues, our neighbors, and our friends. I've been spending too much time at work. So tell us what we can do to help.
Yeah, and we're not opposed to helping our colleagues either.
Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, the first one, I think, and with this elderly transplant patient that I wrote about, we need to know our neighbors, and this is now a fairly good time to meet them because at least in my neighborhood, people are out walking dogs, they're walking their kids because there's nothing else to do. And so you can keep a safe social distance and meet people. But if there are shut-ins in your neighborhood, reach out to them. It's really important because this transplant patient didn't want to trouble any of his neighbors.
I've heard that so often.
He comes from a generation where, people were self-sufficient and he didn't have any family in town. So getting to know people who might need help and stepping in. The second thing is to sort of make a list of what might be needed. What you need in your own house. Chances are an elderly person or a shut-in near you needs it as well. Yep. So check in with them, find out, is there anything you need, and be specific too, because if you say, hey, can I get you anything? They're going to say no. But how are you doing on toilet paper? How are you doing on produce? How are you doing on meat? And if you ask specific questions, you'll get much better answers, and hopefully that'll provide something that you can help with. And then connect resources to those in need. Again, with this transplant patient, I was able to, within about an hour after the story posted, was able to connect him with some social service resources here in the Phoenix area that were able to help him. And they're actually now checking in with him and his wife regularly. And so there's a lot of resources in communities, and just being able to get people the help that they need. And as a positive consequence of that, I had over 40 emails from people who wanted to help this guy. And he had gotten help fairly quickly. So I was able to refer all those people to the agencies that depend on volunteers to reach out to the elderly and shut-ins in our neighborhood. And a lot of people did volunteer.
Yeah,
it's really gratifying to write a story and then have people respond and get the guy help he needs. But to have agencies contact me and say, "Oh my gosh, we've had so many people step up to volunteer," that's just really that's what we're going to need to get through this crisis.
Amen to that. I want to point out for our readers' benefit, and I'm sure we'll be putting the links to some of this stuff in our Facebook comments, but I want to mention, I saw on the Dallas Morning News website, they have two buttons at the bottom of almost all their coronavirus stories. One says, I need help. One says, I can help. And I thought that was like such responsible journalism. I know at the Arizona Republic, we just published a list of 170 state organizations, nonprofits, and agencies that can help you. So if you're watching right now and you feel like you need help or you're not sure who to call, we beat this drum all the time, but for sure, go to your local publication because those newsrooms are rounding up help and resources, and they're printing them, they're putting them online, they're putting them in their social chat. So if you need help, people like John and our colleagues across the network are like looking for ways to connect you with that help. So
that's what we do as local
so powerful.
journalists. We connect people. We make connections in our communities. We live in our communities, and we want them to prosper. And so that's that's what we do.
Awesome. John, I'm going to ask you to stay on just for a little bit longer to be part of the conversation, but thank you for your reporting. Thank you for being there for our greater community. I'm going to bring on our colleague, Nathan Bomey. He's a money reporter at USA Today, and Nathan has been busy. But first I'm going to ask you, how are you doing? You're working from home?
Yeah, I'm hanging in there. I think that, like everybody, just trying to learn how to work from home, get out of the house by taking walks whenever we can. This is the solution to being stir crazy, if you ask me, is you got to get outside. Of course, continue to practice social distancing, but thankfully you can still take walks in most areas.
Yes, and I know it varies on the weather. I always think about March is the cruelest month in the Midwest. Like it feels like you want it to be spring, but it's really more of winter. I'm from Indiana originally. So Nathan, let's talk for a second. Your big story that came out yesterday, and we have so many stories across the network about how many people are hiring right now. I know we're talking about a lot of Americans losing their jobs, but let's just dip in. You had a story about Walgreens, CVS, Amazon. Talk to us about who's hiring and how.
Yeah, the good news is that despite all of the economic pain that's associated with the coronavirus right now, there are companies that are hiring. So you look at Amazon, of course, they've been overwhelmed with demand, and that's leading directly to about 100,000, if not more, new jobs at Amazon warehouses throughout the country. And then, of course, drugstore chains like CVS and Walgreens are adding people. In fact, in some cases, they're actually hiring people who were furloughed from companies like Hilton and Marriott. So that's a good thing to see. The Dollar General, there are other chains that are hiring. And I'd also expect that some small businesses that are, experiencing an increase in business because of this are also going to add. So don't assume that just because the coronavirus is raging means that the local company is not hiring.
That's good to keep in mind. You mentioned it's harder to track small business hiring because they don't have massive public relations agencies. They're not necessarily reaching out to us and letting you know. And they're not hiring in the hundreds of thousands. Let's talk about some of these numbers you're seeing.
Yeah, like I say, Amazon, 100,000, Instacart, I think they said a few 100,000. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty mind-boggling that they are looking to hire that many people. That shows how quickly grocery delivery is expanding here. Of course, one of the issues here is grocery delivery is a little spotty right now if the local store doesn't have supplies, but certainly Instacart's hiring a lot of people. We're looking at CVS hiring, I think, 50, 60,000 people. So, and the other key is this hiring is going to happen fast. Because these companies need to bring people on board very quickly. So, be ready to get to work right away if you're able to do so.
Awesome. Nathan, so that's a bright spot, truly. And thank you for that reporting. I'm going to transition into another conversation about money. You did some reporting earlier in the week about all of the utility companies that are really stepping up for their customers right now. We're talking power, water, phone, internet. Tell us what they're doing to kind of help people get through this period.
Yeah, the good news is that if you're running into trouble because of this, if you're, having to basically, scrimp on cash and you're looking for a little help wherever you can, the utility bill actually may be one area where you can get a little bit of relief because utility companies throughout the country are actually announcing that they are suspending disconnections for one. So you don't need to worry about losing your connection if you run into trouble. And they're also announcing that they're going to give payment relief or basically deferred payments for anyone who's running into issues right now.
That is such a relief. Talk to us about how to take advantage of these opportunities, Nathan, because I know you can't just expect it to happen. So
yeah, don't make any assumptions. Exactly. Don't assume that the utility company knows. In fact, they don't know that you're running into trouble. So you have to reach out to them. And that might mean making a call. It might mean going online and snaking through their system because there's going to be details online about how to process this. It's going to be different for every utility. We're talking about PG&E in California, Duke Energy on the East Coast, DTE Energy in Michigan. This is really all the major utilities offering some form of relief. So, have documentation on hand, because that might be important for some of these utilities. My understanding is that a lot of them are accepting your word for it, taking your word for it if you're having issues, but I would never assume. So you might, if you have, for example, a letter from your employer that says we're letting you go for the next 3 weeks, then I'd keep that and send it to them if necessary. So it's always important to do that, but hopefully you won't have to.
Awesome. Well, Nathan, thank you so much for both of these insights. I'm going to ask you to stay on for just a second to kind of stay in the conversation, but we really appreciate your reporting.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Yeah, so I am happy to bring up two people who are going to talk with us about how things are really impacting them. David and Jackson, we're welcoming you guys back up. This is David Young and his son Jackson from Abilene, Texas. First of all, Jackson, I'm going to go to you and say, man, I am so sorry about your senior year.
Well, it's all right. It's definitely been an adjustment so far. It's been great so far. And, obviously there's a little feeling of disappointment, missing out on all the senior activities, baccalaureate, senior picnic, and, the big question mark of graduation. But at the end of the day, we just the most important thing is staying safe. So we just got to wait and let the situation, get taken care of.
Well, first of all, I want to commend you. Like, man, what a sense of thoughtfulness and emotional maturity you are modeling for all the other seniors across the country. So thank you for that, Jackson. David, you're here as a dad, but you're also here on behalf of an entire school district. So I want to ask you, how many school year activities are likely to be held in real life? Like, what are you guys working on?
Well, so certainly I do wear my superintendent hat all the time, but I also, as you can tell, Jackson's our youngest. He's a senior in high school this year, and this is a great time for him, and it still will be. But I get that question a lot from parents about how are we handling activities like graduation and the prom and other senior activities, as well as elementary and middle school students. And so I can tell you this for sure. We're going to have graduation is an important event for closure for kids, and it acknowledges a tremendous accomplishment on their part, plus their parents want those pictures and all that. So we will have an in-person graduation ceremony, whether we do it, if we have to do it in the middle of July, we're going to do it. Some of the other things, prom and senior activities like concerts and plays and things like that, we're having to kind of take a wait and see approach. We're not canceling too far out, but as this goes on longer and longer, some of those things are moving from the postponed category to the canceled category, unfortunately. The good news is we're trying to find virtual ways to connect kids with students and parents to see their kids on display and some of those academic recognition things along the way.
Well, that brings up, I mean, that's, first of all, the idea of a socially distant prom is the saddest thing. Like, it's like, anyway, I'm just making a terrible joke there, but that is horrible. But you guys are finding solutions to real problems. Wait, I do want to ask Jackson, did you already have a date to prom? Is it too soon to even ask that?
No, not yet.
Sorry, he didn't know I was going to ask
the
that.
whole idea of a virtual prom sounds weird, but if that's what has to happen, then
I guess, yeah, you guys just sit around and listen to music in your houses. I don't know. This is terrible. Anyway, I'm going to ask you, David, you were talking about things the school system is doing to help, like hotspots on buses. You said the community has really rallied around making sure kids still have access to technology. Talk to us about what you guys are doing.
Well, so we've undertaken in the last week, I really am amazed at what has transpired in Abilene ISD. And I know it's occurring in school districts all across the nation. I know colleges were able to flip the switch and go online pretty easily. We don't traditionally have that infrastructure in public schools. And so the notion of going from in-person for 17,000 kids here in Abilene ISD to we opened online yesterday, March 23rd, was a daunting task. But I have to commend our teachers and our instructional staff for getting it going. But what does online education require? It requires two things. It requires a device to access the education, and it requires a broadband internet service. And so we know that those could potentially be barriers to people in our community. And so we've tried to do our part to take some of those barriers away. Last week, Thursday and Friday, we passed out 3,600 Chromebooks to families that came to our schools and said, we need a device so that we can do this at home. And so we were happy to do that. And we're still, even today, passing some out. I was just seeing pictures of a long line at one of our elementary schools picking up Chromebooks. But then the other thing is the internet access. And so some people have it. Sometimes we take that for granted. Some people access it at stores and other venues that are now closed and not available. And so we've had some providers in our community step up and provide service, as well as we're doing things like we now have a hotspot on a pole in our stadium parking lot, and we have one at the convention center, but we're also trying to do mobile hotspots. And so we're outfitting our school buses, 25 of them, with hotspot equipment. And so families know when they see the bus drive up and park in the parking lot or at a park, that they can come up and access the internet there as well.
That is incredible. Holy cow. That is like so affirming to hear that people are doing so much. We want to bring on our colleague, Nathan. He has a question for you, David.
Yeah, I guess my question is, for the future, after we get past this, how do you think school will change because of the crisis? We're all going to be have heightened awareness of this type of thing in the future. So, and were we talking about, having baseball and basketball games where kids don't high five, and, the possibility of teleteaching anytime we hear of a new virus? How do you think things will change going forward?
So I don't know what it means for athletics and activities. Certainly, I hope we get to the point in the world where we can shake hands again and high five and all that. And I bet we do. But you're right. There are some great unintended consequences that are going to come out of this. We are now able to offer online education, whereas a week ago, we weren't. And so we can continue to provide that as a support and a resource. And so we're having to figure out different ways to hire people. You were talking about all the companies that are hiring hundreds of thousands of people. Our board recently authorized an increase of about 60 teachers in our school district. We have about 1,300 teachers in general. And so we had to cancel our job fair last weekend. And so we're now having a virtual job fair that's going on right now. And so I think there are a lot of good things that we might have thought, oh, we can't do that before, that we're now having to find a way to do. And just because the virus ultimately won't be front page news, we'll still have these new skills that we've found.
David, thank you for such a thoughtful response. That is a laundry list. I have another question for Jackson, though. Jackson, can you talk to us about, how are you staying in touch with your friends? What are you doing?
I mean, we've just been, mainly through text message, stuff like that. Just staying in touch, we're all just saying about, how we miss each other so much, and just kind of connecting through the disappointment, but also just understanding the situation as a whole. Just stuff like that, I would say.
Are you doing group hangouts using Zoom or your iPhones, or I don't know, anything like that?
FaceTime has been a big thing that I've been using, and to keep in touch, definitely, I would say.
Are you a member of any clubs or organizations that you would be participating in right now that all got canceled?
Yeah, so I'm in the choir and show choir at my school. So, we always have a bunch of big concerts at the end of the year, graduation concert, baccalaureate, stuff for seniors, stuff like that. That's postponed for now, and we're not sure what's going to happen, but yeah.
Man, I am so sorry. Nathan, you wanted to comment? You have stuff on?
Well, it's funny you mentioned the fact that people are using streaming and video to keep in contact with each other. Of course, we know that businesses are doing the same thing. And in fact, this very activity we're doing right now is illustrative of how, the world is changing. In fact, you look at a company like Zoom, they're actually doing really well right now the last several weeks, because suddenly there's a massive surge in interest in video conferencing. And so there are companies that are, doing well out there, and places that are hiring. And so people can, if you think about it, there are ways in which the economy will change, not all for the worse, in some cases for the better.
Even with a bright side. I want to bring back our colleague, John Deanna. John, thank you. Thanks for being on here. Join us here in the conversation.
Sure. Yeah. Just a comment about the video conferencing. I saw a cartoon in the New Yorker the other day that said, gee, all those meetings really could have been accomplished with emails. So I think this may change a little bit of how we interact in the workplace. All of us at the Arizona Republic have been working from home for for over a week. And, my dog is very happy because he's getting lots of walks in the middle of the day. So yeah, it's, I think, to the Nathan's question about, how is education going to change? I think all of our lives are going to change a little bit. I am so much more conscious now when I'm going out. If there's people, I'm just trying not to get close. As a reporter, I've done a few stories that are out in public. I did one on a search for toilet paper. I went to 21 different stores. And so I was really conscious of how close I was getting to people and how close people were getting to me. And then I did another one on how the virus is affecting people who don't have access to a vehicle and have to rely on mass transit. And so I noticed all the spacing on mass transit that was really interesting. So it's going to be a very different world, and I think people are going to be just a lot more conscious of it. And I hope that lasts for a while, that we can help keep each other safe.
I appreciate that, John. One thing I do hope doesn't change though is, like the reason we were so excited to have David and Jackson on is because like high school year, your senior year is like filled with so many rites of passage and so many things that like, not just in the movies, but in real life, like you look back and think, that was great. This is a true story. I always joke that I don't know if I was popular in high school, but I remember being popular. Like in my head, I felt like I had a lot of friends and I had a great time and it was really great. So Jackson, I'm going to give you the last word. I want to say like, we all really hope that you guys get to recreate some sense of normalcy about your senior year. But until then, I want to ask you to kind of like send us off. What do you think so far has been like the most surprising part? Like you're not seeing your friends face to face, but what are you learning about your friendships or school now during this time?
I guess just I've learned how close, some of my relationships with my friends really are. If we're not able to see each other all the time, we're still working really hard to stay in touch. And I guess sometimes just in the normalcy of seeing someone every day, you don't truly appreciate, your relationship with them. But during this circumstance, I've really gotten to learn that I really do have some good relationships and some good people in my life that I'm going to treasure. So.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. I'm like a little teared up. That was really, well, good, Jackson. That's really what I was hoping for, is because like these times really bring out often the best in us. And so I'm glad that part of your senior year is really coming through, because you do usually find that out senior year, how much you love the people you're with. So that's staying true. Listen, everyone, thank you so much for being on our show today. David and Jackson, thank you for being here from Texas. John, thanks for being here from Phoenix. Nathan, thank you for being here from USA Today and our hub. I want to thank everyone for watching. We really appreciate also Ken. He's already off, but I can still thank him for his time and his reporting. For more, please come to usatoday.com/news/coronavirus, or just like come to our website. You can see them all down here. Follow us on our Facebook page, where we're having all kinds of updates all the time, or you can catch us on Instagram. It has been a blessing to be here with you. We'll see you on our next show on Tuesday, March 31st at the same time. And my accent wall will still be that color of sort of like melon. Thank you so much for being on. I appreciate your time this morning.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you like this video, check out these other videos from USA Today to stay up to date with all the latest news.